I never thought I'd end up in a place like this. If someone told me a year ago that I'd be living in New Orleans, in a house that looked like it came straight out of a ghost story, I probably would have laughed. But life has a way of pushing you into corners you never planned for. Rent kept climbing, bills piled up, and eventually, I had to admit the truth. I needed a cheap place no matter what strings came attached. That's how I found myself standing in front of this house, a 2-story place on the edge of town, with cracked paint, sagging shutters, and a for rent sign that looked like it had been hanging there for years. And here's where I should warn you. Sometimes the deals that look too good to be true are exactly that. Welcome back. You're listening to a story on Mr. Nightmare. If you enjoy creepy stories that stick with you long after they're over, make sure you subscribe, because tonight I'll tell you what happened when I moved into a cheap house in New Orleans. Just remember, whatever you do, don't look outside at 3:33 a.m. I still remember the first time I called the number on the sign. A man answered, his voice low and a little raspy, like someone who smoked too much. He said his name was Richard and that he was the property manager. The rent was unbelievably cheap, half the price of any other place I'd seen. I asked him why, of course. Why was it so low? He chuckled in a way that didn't make me feel better. People come and go, he said vaguely. Not everyone likes living here. That was all he offered. I pushed a little, tried to ask if there had been problems with the house, if something was wrong with the neighborhood, but he dodged every question. In the end, the price was too tempting, and I told myself I was being paranoid. When I first walked through the house, I thought, okay, maybe it just needs some work. The floorboards creaked under every step. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and the smell of mildew clung to the air like an unwelcome guest. But there was something about the place. It felt like it was waiting. The front door groaned when Richard opened it, and I noticed the locks, 3 of them heavy and old, stacked one on top of the other. I remember joking, "You trying to keep something out or keep someone in?" Richard didn't laugh. He just looked at me, his face unreadable, and said, "Locks are important around here." Then he showed me the rest of the house like nothing had happened. The living room was wide but empty, with dust covering every surface. The kitchen had outdated appliances, a fridge that rattled every time it kicked on, and cabinets with doors that didn't close all the way. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms. The one at the end of the hall had a window that overlooked the street. Richard paused there for a second, his eyes fixed on that window. I thought maybe he was going to tell me something, maybe warn me, but instead he just cleared his throat and said, "This one gets a lot of moonlight." He turned away before I could respond. I signed the lease that same day. It felt impulsive, but I convinced myself it was the right call. I didn't have much choice, not really. The day I moved in, I hauled boxes up the narrow staircase, the wood groaning under the weight like the house resented me already. My friends helped me for a while, but by evening they were gone, and I was left alone in that big, quiet house. That first night, I sat on the floor of the living room eating takeout, my boxes piled up around me. The silence pressed in on me. I told myself I'd get used to it. It was just the creaks of an old house, the settling of wood, the hum of the fridge. But as I carried my trash out to the bin in the backyard, I noticed something strange. Across the street there was another house, but it looked abandoned, windows boarded, yard overgrown. And yet in the upper window I swore I saw a figure standing there perfectly still, watching me. I froze with the trash bag in my hand. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was just a shadow, maybe some leftover mannequin or furniture. But when I blinked, the figure was gone. I hurried back inside, locked the door, and told myself I was just tired. Moving takes a lot out of you, and exhaustion plays tricks on your eyes. But even as I lay in my sleeping bag on the bedroom floor, my eyes kept drifting to the window, half expecting to see someone staring back at me. The next morning, I ran into Richard again. He came by to drop off an extra set of keys. He lingered longer than necessary, standing in the doorway with his eyes darting around the house like he was checking for something. I asked him about the boarded-up house across the street, tried to sound casual. His expression tightened. "Don't worry about that place," he said flatly. "It's been empty a long time." When I pressed him, he snapped. I said, "Don't worry about it." He forced a smile after that, but it didn't reach his eyes. That smile stuck with me for the rest of the day. It wasn't the kind of smile that eased your nerves. It was the kind that made you wonder what he wasn't telling you. Still, I unpacked more boxes, tried to make the place feel like home. I bought groceries, stocked the fridge, and even set up a little desk by the window. For a while, it almost felt normal. But as night fell again, the air shifted. The house grew colder, even though the heater rattled on. Outside, the street was eerily quiet. New Orleans is usually full of sound. Music, laughter, cars, voices. But on my block, when darkness settled in, it was like the world held its breath. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, moving along the porch. My body froze, every nerve alert. I wanted to peek through the window, but something deep inside whispered, "Don't." Instead, I sat in silence, gripping the baseball bat I'd kept from college. The footsteps stopped. Then, after what felt like hours, they moved away. I told myself it was just a neighbor, someone out late, maybe walking a dog. But in my gut, I knew better. That night, before I drifted off, I glanced at the clock on my phone. 12 a.m. I told myself not to think about it, not to obsess over the time. But little did I know 3:33 was coming. And once you see what waits at that hour, there's no turning back. The second night in the house started like any other. I spent the day unpacking, arranging what little furniture I owned, and trying to convince myself that this place could become something like a home. I kept the blinds open for most of the afternoon, letting the Louisiana sun pour in as if light could scrub away the strange unease that seemed to cling to the walls. For a while, it almost worked. The house felt less like a stranger and more like something I could belong in. But as the sun dropped, shadows grew longer, and every corner of the place seemed to breathe again. I microwaved some leftovers, set my food down at the little desk by the front window, and tried to relax. That was when I noticed it, the sound of tapping. Faint, irregular, like someone drumming their fingers against the glass. At first, I thought it was just the wind rattling the old panes. But when I turned my head, the blinds shifted slightly, like someone had brushed past them from outside. My stomach twisted. I told myself to check, to prove it was nothing. But when I peeked through the slats, the street was empty, silent as a grave. I forced myself to laugh it off, but the sound died in my throat. Across the street, the boarded-up house sat in its usual silence. Yet something about it seemed different now, like it was leaning closer, watching me. I shut the blinds and tried to focus on my food, but every bite tasted like dust. The rest of the evening dragged. I turned on the TV for background noise, let some reality show run in the background, but the volume seemed to echo too loudly in the empty rooms. I muted it eventually, just so I could hear myself think. That was when the floor creaked upstairs. I froze. The sound was unmistakable, weight shifting on old wood, a step then another. My first thought was that Richard had left someone a spare key, that maybe a former tenant had come back. My mind scrambled for a logical explanation, but none of them made me feel better. I grabbed the baseball bat again and slowly climbed the stairs, my heart pounding in my throat. When I reached the top, the hall stretched out in dim shadows. The door to the end bedroom was cracked open. I was certain I had closed it earlier. I nudged it open with the bat, holding my breath. The room was empty. Just boxes stacked in the corner, moonlight spilling through the window. But the air felt heavier in there, colder. I backed out, closed the door firmly, and told myself to stop imagining things. By the time I made it back downstairs, the clock read 2:47 a.m. I told myself I needed to sleep, that tomorrow I'd feel different. But sleep never came easily. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, every sound amplified. The refrigerator's hum felt like thunder, the ticking of the clock like a hammer. I rolled over, pulled the blanket tighter, tried to breathe. That was when I heard the whisper. It wasn't clear at first, more like the rustle of leaves. But as I strained to listen, the sound sharpened. A voice low, almost inside the room. "Don't look outside." My blood ran cold. I sat up instantly, scanning the dark. The window curtains fluttered slightly, though the glass was shut tight. I wanted to believe it was just my mind replaying Richard's words, the way he lingered at the window upstairs. Maybe my brain was dragging up scraps of memory, twisting them into something sinister, but deep down I knew I hadn't imagined it. The whisper didn't come again, but the silence that followed was worse. Every second stretched longer than it should have until I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my phone, its glow blinding in the dark, and saw the time. 3:21 a.m. I lay back down, phone clutched to my chest like a talisman. The numbers ticked forward second by second until the screen read 3:32. My stomach dropped. For reasons I couldn't explain, I knew something was about to happen. The moment the clock turned 3:33, the tapping returned. Louder this time, insistent, coming from the window right beside my bed. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I didn't want to look, every instinct screamed at me not to. The whisper echoed in my head again, "Don't look outside." But the human mind is cruel. The harder you fight the urge, the stronger it becomes. Slowly, against my own will, my head turned toward the glass. There was nothing there, just the faint reflection of my own pale face in the darkness. Relief washed over me, almost making me laugh. Until the reflection smiled. My lips hadn't moved, but the face in the glass grinned wide and unnatural. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the blanket. When I looked again, the glass was empty. I spent the rest of the night sitting upright, every light in the house turned on. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. When the sun finally rose, the house looked normal again, even harmless. But I knew better now. This place wasn't just old. It wasn't just creaky. It was wrong in a way I couldn't explain. And deep down I understood. Whatever was happening, it had only just begun. The third night should have been easier. By then I told myself I was getting used to the quirks of the place. The way the pipes moaned when the water ran. The way the floorboards popped in the middle of the night. The way the wind sometimes slipped through cracks and made the walls sigh. But the more time I spent in that house, the more I realized those noises weren't random. They had a rhythm. They came at certain times in certain rooms, like someone walking a path I couldn't see. That morning I tried to shake it off. I brewed coffee in the ancient machine that Richard had left behind, the smell barely masking the damp scent that clung to everything. As I sat at the kitchen table, sipping from a chipped mug, I noticed something carved into the wood. At first it looked like random scratches, but when the light hit it just right, I could see the letters. 333. My stomach dropped. It wasn't neat, more like someone had dug it in with a knife, each line angry and uneven. I ran my fingers over it, half expecting a splinter, but the grooves were smooth, worn down like they'd been there for years. I wanted to call Richard, demand to know what the hell this was about. But some part of me hesitated. If he knew, he hadn't said anything, and if he didn't, then who had left it? Instead, I pulled my sleeve over it, hiding the numbers from sight as if that could erase them. The day passed slowly. I unpacked more boxes, trying to distract myself. In one, I found an old photo album my mother had given me before I moved. Family gatherings, childhood birthdays, things that felt safe, warm. I flipped through the pictures for a while, letting the memories drown out the unease. But even then, I couldn't shake the thought of those numbers carved into the table, staring at me every time I walked by. That evening, I decided to explore the house more carefully. There were closets I hadn't opened, corners I hadn't really looked at. The basement door caught my eye first. It was small, tucked away behind the kitchen, almost easy to miss. When I tried the knob, it resisted at first, then gave with a groan. The smell hit me immediately, damp, earthy, like soil that had never seen sunlight. I flicked the switch on the wall, but the single bulb at the top of the stairs only flickered weakly. The basement was unfinished, just concrete walls and a dirt floor. My flashlight beam caught on old shelves stacked with paint cans, rusted tools, and boxes collapsing from moisture. But what made my skin crawl were the marks on the walls. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. At first I thought they were scratches from rats or something. But when I looked closer, I realized they were tally marks. Groups of 5, over and over, carved into the stone. Someone had been keeping count of something. The air felt too heavy down there, like it was pressing against my chest. I didn't last long. I shut the basement door and locked it, telling myself it was just old tenants fooling around, just some weird history I didn't need to care about. But my hands shook as I turned the key. Later, while I was cleaning the upstairs bathroom, I noticed something strange about the mirror. At first glance, it was just spotted, old with streaks that no amount of Windex could fix. But when I leaned closer, I realized the streaks weren't on the surface, they were inside the glass. Like shapes frozen between layers. And if I stared long enough, those shapes seemed to form eyes, watching me. I backed away fast, heart hammering. It was impossible. Just an old mirror. Tricks of the mind. I covered it with a towel and refused to look at it again. That night I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that every weird thing had an explanation. Old houses are full of secrets. But as the clock crept toward midnight, the air grew colder again. I heard the now familiar footsteps on the porch, pacing back and forth. My throat went dry. I wanted to believe it was just a drunk neighbor, someone wandering the wrong block. But when I gathered the courage to peek through the blinds, the street was empty. Completely, utterly empty. I backed away from the window, my skin crawling. That was when I noticed something else, muddy footprints on the inside of the door. They started just at the threshold as if someone had stepped in, paused, then vanished. I hadn't seen them before. I checked every lock again, my hands trembling as I slid the bolts into place. The prints were too large to be mine, too wide, too long. And the mud. The mud was fresh. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those numbers carved into the kitchen table, glowing faintly in the dark. 333, a warning, a promise I didn't know, but I couldn't escape the feeling that the house was leading me somewhere, showing me pieces of something I wasn't meant to see. And the worst part? I was starting to feel like I wasn't just a tenant here. I was a replacement. By the fourth night, I stopped pretending the house was normal. Too many things had piled up. The whisper, the reflection in the glass, the tally marks in the basement, the footprints inside the door. It was more than coincidence, more than tricks of the mind. Something was happening here, and I had to decide whether I wanted to face it or keep pretending it wasn't real. Of course, I told myself I'd be smart, that I'd stay alert, that I'd pay attention without crossing any dangerous lines. But the truth is, the house already knew me. It already had me. That day began strangely enough. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Unknown number. I usually ignored those, but for some reason, half asleep, I answered. The line was filled with static, crackling so loud I almost hung up. Then through the static, a voice whispered, "Why did you open the door?" My chest tightened. I tried to speak, but my throat was locked. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the screen, my hand trembling. No record of the call. No voicemail. Just silence. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was a prank. Maybe Richard gave my number to someone. Maybe some local kids got hold of it. But the words stayed with me, wrapping around my thoughts. "Why did you open the door?" I hadn't, at least not to them. Later that morning, I went outside to clear my head. The street was as quiet as ever, the boarded-up house across the road still looming like a watchful eye. This time, though, I noticed something new. One of the boards on the upstairs window had shifted. Not much, just enough to leave a gap, and behind it a sliver of darkness that seemed occupied. I stared for too long until my neck prickled and my instincts screamed to look away. When I blinked, the board looked untouched, nailed shut like before. But I knew what I had seen. When I got back inside, the smell hit me. Not the usual mildew, but something sharper, like copper, metallic, mixed with damp earth. It made my stomach twist. I followed it into the kitchen, half expecting to find a dead animal in the walls. Instead, I found water pooling on the floor, seeping from under the fridge. The hum I'd grown used to was gone. The fridge had died. I pulled it open, bracing for the worst. Every single item inside was rotten. The milk I'd bought 2 days ago was chunky sludge. The vegetables slimy, the meat gray and reeking. It wasn't possible. Food doesn't rot that fast. I spent an hour cleaning, gagging the whole time, but the smell clung to my skin. When I finally dragged the trash outside, I felt eyes on me. Across the street, on the sidewalk, a man stood. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. He wore a plain gray hoodie, his hands stuffed into the pocket, his face half hidden by the hood. I called out, trying to sound tougher than I felt. "Can I help you?" No response. He didn't move, didn't even tilt his head. My voice cracked when I repeated myself. Still nothing. Then in one slow, deliberate motion, he raised his hand and pointed, not at me, but at my house. My blood ran cold. I took a step back toward the porch, clutching the railing. The man lowered his hand, turned, and walked away. No hurry, no rush, just casual steps until he vanished around the corner. I wanted to chase him, demand an explanation, but my legs wouldn't obey. I stayed rooted there, my heart hammering, until I finally stumbled back inside and locked every bolt. By nightfall, I was jumpy, every creak making me flinch. I tried to distract myself with TV again, but the screen kept flickering, the picture distorting into lines of static. At one point, the image froze entirely. A dark figure filled the screen, blurry, hunched, with arms too long to be human. I yanked the plug from the wall, heart in my throat, and sat in silence. That was worse. Sometime after midnight, I heard it again. The tapping. Not at the window this time, but at the basement door. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was knocking from the inside. My body locked in place. I stared at the door, at the key I'd left in the lock. The sound stopped. Then came a new one. The sound of something dragging across the dirt floor beneath the house. I backed away step by step until my back hit the far wall. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Same unknown number. Against every instinct I answered, static. Then faint but clear. Don't let them out. My breath caught. Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaking. But the line went dead. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, baseball bat across my lap, staring at the basement door. Around 3:15, the air grew colder. By 3:25, I could see my breath. At exactly 3:33, the key in the lock rattled like unseen fingers were twisting it. I held my breath, ready to swing if the door opened. But it never did. After a minute, the rattling stopped, and the house sank into silence again. When dawn broke, I felt hollow, like I'd aged years in one night. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked gaunt, my eyes ringed with shadows. I told myself I couldn't live like this, that I had to leave, find another place, even crash on a friend's couch. But when I opened the front door, I froze. Sitting on the porch was a package. No return address, no markings. Just a plain cardboard box, damp with morning dew. I shouldn't have touched it. I know that now, but curiosity gnawed at me. I carried it inside, set it on the table, and cut it open with shaking hands. Inside, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was an old alarm clock. The hands were frozen at 3:33. I thought the box with the alarm clock was the worst of it. I was wrong. That was just the start of something far more terrifying. The moment I placed the clock on the kitchen table, the air in the room seemed to grow heavy, pressing down on my chest. The hands of the clock didn't move. They were stuck at 3:33, forever mocking me. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Something about it felt dangerous, like discarding it would make things worse. So I left it there, a silent intruder in my home. The next few nights blurred together in fragments of sleepless hours, every sound amplified in the dark. The ticking pipes, the scratching of branches against the windows, the soft moan of the wind through the cracks in the walls. But mixed in with those familiar noises were others I couldn't explain. Whispers in the hall when I knew I was alone, the sound of footsteps circling my bed while I lay paralyzed beneath the covers. Sometimes when I forced myself to sit up and look, the hallway light would flicker, and the shadows seemed to stretch across the floor like living things. On the sixth night, I made the mistake of looking outside. It was almost 3:30. My nerves were raw, my hands shaking as I clutched the bat, waiting for whatever would happen. Curiosity got the better of me. I thought maybe if I see it, maybe if I face it, it'll lose its power. So I pulled back the curtain just an inch and looked. At first, nothing. The street was empty. The boarded house across the road dark and silent. Then slowly, shapes emerged from the shadows. Figures, dozens of them standing along the sidewalks, in the yards, even in the middle of the road. They weren't moving, weren't speaking, just standing, facing my house. Some looked like people, dressed in hoodies or coats, their faces obscured. Others looked wrong, too tall, too thin, heads tilted at unnatural angles, limbs too long. My breath caught in my throat, my vision tunneling. And then, as if on cue, every single head turned upward, locking onto the exact window where I stood. I stumbled back, yanking the curtain shut. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst, but it wasn't over. A knock sounded at the front door. Not a polite tap, but a sharp, commanding knock that echoed through the house. Then another, harder. The doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to get in. I crept toward the door, bat raised, though my legs felt like lead. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. Then suddenly an eye filled the hole. Black, lidless, pressed so close I could see the wet sheen of it. I screamed and stumbled back, nearly dropping the bat. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I don't know how long I stood frozen in the hallway, but eventually I heard it. The steady ticking of the alarm clock in the kitchen. The one that hadn't ticked before. I crept back, my breath shallow, and saw the hands moving. Slowly, relentlessly, the minute hand climbed until it reached 3:33. Then the ringing began. Loud, shrill, unnatural, like the scream of metal tearing. I clutched my ears, but it pierced straight through me. Lights flickered. The floor vibrated, and from the basement, the sound of chains snapping echoed up the stairs. Something was coming out. The basement door shuddered on its hinges. The key rattled in the lock, twisting as though invisible hands were forcing it. I lunged forward, slamming my shoulder against the door to hold it shut. It was a mistake. The moment my skin touched the wood, ice spread through my veins, paralyzing me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, but I could hear it, breathing on the other side, deep and ragged, inhuman. Then a voice, low and guttural, whispered through the crack. You let them see you. My strength returned in a rush and I staggered back, slamming the bat against the door until the rattling stopped. The alarm clock went silent. The air lightened, just enough for me to breathe again, but I knew it wasn't over. Whatever lived in that basement hadn't given up. It was waiting. The next day, desperate for answers, I confronted Richard. I drove straight to his office, barged in without an appointment. He looked startled but not surprised, like he'd been expecting this. "You didn't tell me," I snapped. My voice was raw, my hands shaking. "You didn't tell me what this place is." He sighed, leaning back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I told you the rules," he said quietly. "That's all I can do." "What's in the basement?" I demanded. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me, his eyes heavy with something like pity. Finally, he said, "You should leave. If you stay, you'll end up like the rest." "The rest?" I pressed, but he just shook his head, scribbled something on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. It was a phone number, nothing else. "If it gets worse," he said, "call this. Don't say my name. Don't mention me, just ask for help." I wanted to demand more, to shake the truth out of him, but the look in his eyes stopped me. A look of pure fear. That night, back at the house, I stared at the scrap of paper, debating whether to use it. But before I could decide, things escalated. Around midnight, the TV turned itself on, blasting static so loud it rattled the windows. I rushed to shut it off, but the remote didn't work. The buttons did nothing. Then the static shifted. A face appeared on the screen, blurry, distorted, but unmistakably my own. Only it wasn't me. The eyes were hollow, black voids, the mouth stretched too wide, grinning. It lifted a finger and pointed directly at me. The lights went out. The house plunged into darkness. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe until my phone buzzed in my pocket. I yanked it out. Unknown number. Against all reason, I answered. "Don't look outside," the voice hissed. Too late. I had already turned toward the window, and outside in the yard they were waiting. Not dozens this time, but hundreds, packed shoulder to shoulder, filling the street, the sidewalks, the lawns, a sea of figures all facing my house. The clock on the table began to tick again. 31, 3, 32. I backed away from the window, clutching the bat, praying for dawn. 33. The knocking started again. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that distorted version of myself grinning from the static screen, its hollow eyes drilling into me. The warning replayed in my head, "Don't look outside." But it was impossible to unsee the sea of figures crowding the street. By morning, they were gone, leaving nothing but muddy footprints stamped across the sidewalk like some grotesque parade had passed through. My neighbors acted like nothing had happened. One old man watering his lawn waved at me cheerfully, as if hundreds of faceless watchers hadn't been standing there just hours ago. Either he didn't see them or he was pretending not to. Both possibilities unsettled me equally. I tried calling the number Richard had given me. A cold, automated voice answered, "This number is not in service." My stomach dropped. I dialed again, and this time a different voice, human, calm, almost soothing, whispered through the receiver. "We know where you are. Help will come if you follow the rules." Then the line went dead. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried distracting myself, cleaning the kitchen, unpacking boxes I'd been ignoring. But no matter what I did, the clock on the table always pulled my attention back. Its hands moved at their own pace, ticking unevenly, sometimes skipping seconds, sometimes stalling for minutes at a time. Once I caught it spinning backward, and yet no matter how erratic it behaved, it always settled at 3:33 whenever I looked away for long enough. That evening I thought about leaving, just packing up my stuff and driving until the house was nothing but a bad memory. But when I opened the front door, the world outside didn't look right. The street seemed longer, stretched impossibly far, the horizon bending away like some warped painting. A heavy fog rolled in, swallowing the houses across the road. The moment I stepped onto the porch, I felt eyes on me. Shadows stirred within the mist. I slammed the door shut, bolted it, and collapsed against the wall. I wasn't going anywhere. As night fell, the noises began again. Not whispers this time, but scratches. Long, deliberate scrapes across the walls, moving from room to room like something circling me inside my own home. I followed the sound, bat in hand, until it stopped in the living room. That's when I noticed the photographs. I hadn't put up any photos yet. The frames were empty when I unpacked them. But now pictures hung neatly across the wall. Candid shots of me in the house. Eating dinner, sleeping in bed, standing at the window. Each one dated, time-stamped. My blood ran cold when I saw the last photo. It was me crouched in the hallway, staring at the very wall where the photos now hung. The timestamp? Just 1 minute earlier. I spun around, bat raised, but the hallway was empty. The phone rang. My heart jumped. Slowly, I picked it up. "Leave," the voice said. Same calm whisper as before. "Or stay and remember, don't let it in." I wanted to scream, demand answers, but all that came out was a hoarse, "What is it?" The line crackled, a hiss like static. Then the voice replied, softer than before. "It was here long before you. It will be here long after. The house is its mouth. You are inside." The call ended. I didn't move for what felt like hours. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the fridge set my nerves on fire. At some point, I realized the photos were gone. The wall was bare again, as if mocking me. Around 2:30, exhaustion finally pulled me into a shallow sleep on the couch. That's when I dreamed, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was standing outside the house, but the sky was blood red. The street cracked and broken. The figures stood around me again, countless, stretching into the horizon. This time they spoke in unison, a low chant vibrating in my bones. 333, 333, 333. Their voices rose, deafening, until I fell to my knees. Then, from the sea of bodies, one figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, face hidden beneath a hood. When it pulled the hood back, I saw my own face again, only older, worn, lifeless. It smiled, and the chant stopped. Silence crushed the air. Then it leaned close and whispered, "You will open the door." I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the clock already ticking toward 3:33, and then the basement door rattled. The rattling at the basement door grew louder, shaking the frame so violently I thought the hinges might tear free. I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the bat with white-knuckled fists. But I knew if the door gave way, wood and metal wouldn't stop what was behind it. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the rattling stopped. Silence. A silence so deep it swallowed the ticking of the clock, the hum of the fridge, even the sound of my own breathing. The house was holding its breath. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. A shape stood at the end of the hallway, barely visible in the dim light. A tall, thin figure, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just watched. I blinked and it was gone. My chest heaved, adrenaline flooding through me. I wasn't hallucinating. I couldn't have been. I retreated to my bedroom, barricaded the door with the dresser, and sat in the corner waiting for dawn. My phone buzzed once, twice, over and over, vibrating across the floor. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I shoved it under a pillow, pressed my hands over my ears, and rocked back and forth until the light finally crept through the blinds. The morning brought no comfort. My dresser was back in place, the door wide open, though I had no memory of moving it. The air smelled faintly of mildew and iron, like the scent of wet earth mixed with blood. In the kitchen, the clock lay on the floor, shattered, its glass face cracked into a spider web. The hand still pointed at 3:33. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, determined to confront Richard again, demand the truth. But when I drove to his office, it was empty. Not closed, empty. No furniture, no files, no desk. Just bare walls and a floor coated in dust as though no one had occupied it for years. Yet the memory of our conversation was too vivid to dismiss. I checked the directory outside. His name wasn't listed. I left shaken, convinced I was losing my mind. On the drive home, though, something worse happened. The streets twisted. Corners I turned led me back to the same intersection. Signs flickered, names of streets rearranging themselves. Every route led me back toward the house, as if the city itself had become a maze with only one exit. The place I least wanted to return. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I wasn't alone. A woman stood on the sidewalk staring at the house. Her dress was old-fashioned, yellowed with age, her hair long and tangled. At first I thought she was just another hallucination, but then she spoke. "You shouldn't have opened it," she said softly, her voice hoarse but human. I froze. "Opened what?" "The house," she replied. "It's not a home. It's a throat. It swallows." Before I could ask more, she turned and walked into the fog that had begun to roll down the street. I ran after her, desperate for answers, but within seconds she was gone. dissolved into the mist like she had never been there at all. Back inside, the air was thicker, heavier than before. I could hear the basement door creaking softly, like something breathing behind it. Then the photos returned, scattered across the living room floor this time. Dozens of them. Images of me not just inside the house but outside, driving, at the grocery store, talking to Richard. They weren't just watching me here. They were everywhere. I dropped to my knees, flipping through the photos with shaking hands until one stopped me cold. It showed me sitting exactly where I was now, surrounded by the same photos holding the same one. The timestamp? 5 minutes in the future. I dropped the stack, heart hammering, and stumbled back. The phone rang again. Against every instinct, I picked it up. The same whisper as before, only now it was frantic, urgent. Don't go near the basement. No matter what you hear, don't open it. I never opened it. I snapped. There was a pause. Then the voice said, not yet. The line went dead. That night was the worst yet. The house shook with noises I couldn't place. Scraping claws, guttural growls. The thud of heavy footsteps pacing just below the floorboards. Shadows flickered along the walls, though no light source moved. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman in the yellow dress mouthing words I couldn't hear. At 3:33 exactly, the power went out. The house plunged into total darkness. I lit a candle, the only source of light, and held it in front of me as I crept through the halls. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened windows, but it didn't move when I did. Its grin stretched wider and wider until it pressed its palms flat against the glass, pounding as if trying to get in or get out. The basement door boomed once, twice, louder each time. My candle flickered, guttered, and went out. I was left in pure blackness with only the sound of that rattling door and my own ragged breathing. I thought it would burst open. I thought whatever was inside would finally come through. But instead, something worse happened. A whisper right behind me, close enough to feel the breath against my ear. We're already here. I turned, swinging the bat blindly, but hit nothing. The door went still. Silence reclaimed the house, heavy and suffocating. When dawn came, I found new scratches etched into the walls. Long, vertical gouges, as if claws had raked across the plaster. They formed shapes, symbols I didn't recognize, but staring at them made my stomach churn and my vision blur. I covered them with sheets, but I could still feel them, humming beneath the fabric, alive. I realized then the truth. I wasn't just dealing with something in the basement. The whole house was infected. Maybe it always had been. And now so was I. The scratches on the walls never stopped humming. Even covered with sheets, they pulsed with some invisible rhythm, like veins pumping through the house itself. Every time I walked past them, my skin prickled, the fine hairs on my arms rising as if I were brushing against a low-voltage current. I couldn't unhear it, couldn't escape it. The more I tried to ignore the symbols, the louder they seemed to sing in my bones. By the 7th night, the air had grown so dense that breathing felt like inhaling water. I tried to keep myself grounded, muttering to keep my mind from spiraling, but the house had a way of twisting every sound into something else. My muttered words would echo back distorted, like another voice mocking me from just behind the walls. It was around midnight when the phone rang again. I nearly ignored it, but some instinct forced me to answer. Silence at first, then the whisper, "It's almost open." My throat closed. "What is?" The voice paused, and when it spoke again, it was layered as though more than one person spoke at the same time. "The throat, the mouth, you will see." The call dropped. Moments later, a loud bang shook the house. The basement door again. But this time it wasn't just rattling. It bulged outward, the wood groaning as though something massive pressed against it from inside. Dust fell from the ceiling. I backed away, bat in hand, every instinct screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls themselves were shifting, stretching, as if the house was breathing with the effort of keeping whatever was behind that door contained. And then the chanting began. Low at first, almost like the hum of an engine, but it grew, rising in volume until I realized it wasn't coming from the basement. It was outside. I crept to the window, hesitated, then pulled the curtain back an inch. My stomach dropped. They were back. Hundreds of them. Figures crammed shoulder to shoulder, filling the entire street, standing deathly still. Their heads all tilted up at the exact same angle, faces fixed on my window. The chanting rose in unison. 3:33. 3:33. 3:33. I dropped the curtain, pressing my back to the wall. My phone buzzed again, but when I looked, the screen was black. Off. Dead. Yet it vibrated in my hand like something alive. The lights flickered, dimmed, then died, plunging the house into pitch black. I lit a candle with shaking hands, clutching it like a lifeline. That's when the photographs reappeared, scattered across the floor again, dozens of them. But these weren't just pictures of me. They were pictures of people I didn't recognize. Men, women, children, some old, some recent, every single one taken in this house. Their faces were twisted in fear, caught mid-scream, eyes wide and unseeing. In the center of the pile, one photo stood out. It was blank at first glance, just a gray blur. But as I stared, shapes began to form. My own living room, me standing exactly where I was. Only this time I wasn't holding a candle. I was holding the door to the basement wide open. The candle guttered, nearly went out. I dropped the photo and stumbled back, clutching my head. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Then the whisper came again. Not from the phone, not from behind the walls, this time from right behind me. "Open it!" I spun, swinging the bat, but hit nothing. The whisper echoed, this time from the hallway. "Open it." The candlelight stretched, casting long, unnatural shadows across the walls. The sheets covering the symbols rippled as though something breathed beneath them. My heart pounded so hard I could barely think. And then the basement door boomed again, louder than before, splintering under the strain. I ran to the kitchen, searching for anything, salt, candles, anything to protect myself. That's when I saw it. The alarm clock, perfectly whole again, sitting on the table as if it had never shattered. The hands ticked steadily. Foyatidu, my chest tightened. I knew what was coming. The chanting outside grew deafening. The figures began to move now, not toward the house, but in circles, swaying in rhythm, their voices rising in an inhuman chorus. The air vibrated with it, rattling the dishes in the cabinets, shaking dust from the rafters. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the phone, though it was still black, and screamed into it. "What do you want from me?" For the first time, the voice didn't whisper. It screamed back, distorted and thunderous. To feed, the basement door cracked. A jagged fissure split down the center, blackness spilling through like liquid shadow. The house shook violently, pictures crashing from the walls, the floorboards buckling beneath my feet. I clutched the bat, sweat pouring down my face, and backed away. But deep down I knew I wouldn't be able to stop it this time. The clock ticked one last time. Tiri, the door exploded outward. The basement door exploded outward in a storm of splinters, and the air itself seemed to collapse inward. A foul stench surged up from below. Rot, damp soil, something metallic like rust and blood all blended into one choking wave. I gagged, stumbling back, raising the bat instinctively, though I knew it was as useless as holding a stick against a hurricane. From the void beyond the shattered door, something moved. Not footsteps, not crawling, more like the dragging weight of a body being pulled across stone, nails scraping. The shadows clung to the doorway, thick and liquid, refusing to let me see what was coming. Then two hands gripped the frame. Pale, wrong, too long. Fingers ending in cracked, jagged nails. They pulled something through, something that didn't belong in this world. Its head emerged first. Bald skin stretched tight, mouth hanging slack as if dislocated. The teeth were blackened, too many, and they clicked like chattering bones. Its eyes, or where eyes should have been, were hollow pits, wet and endless. When it inhaled, the entire room seemed to sink, the candle flame bending toward it like it was sucking the air itself. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs, but the thing kept coming. The rest of its body slithered out, thin but impossibly tall, joints bending at angles that snapped with every movement. Behind it, more hands gripped the frame, more figures pressing against the opening, eager to follow. "No," I whispered, voice cracking. "No, no, no." The chanting outside reached a fever pitch. I could hear fists pounding against the walls now, hundreds of them in perfect rhythm, shaking the house to its core. The figures outside weren't just chanting, they were urging this thing through. Helping it, the creature fully stepped into the room, the boards beneath it warped, groaning like they couldn't support its weight. And then, in a voice that wasn't a voice but a chorus of overlapping tones, it spoke. "Hungry." I swung the bat. Useless. The wood cracked against its arm, but it didn't even flinch. Instead, its head snapped down, mouth stretching wider than any jaw should, and it screamed. The sound wasn't just noise. It was pressure. Force. My ears burst with pain, blood trickling warm down my neck. The candle snuffed out, plunging me into suffocating blackness. I ran, blind, stumbling over furniture, slamming into walls, but I didn't care. I had to get out. The front door. I just needed to reach the front door. But the house stretched. No matter how far I ran, the hallway seemed endless, doors multiplying, each one slamming open as I passed to reveal glimpses of impossible rooms. A hospital corridor, a cave dripping with water, a street I didn't recognize where figures stood waiting. Every doorway showed a place that couldn't exist inside this house. Yet here they were, flashing by as if the house itself was unraveling. Behind me, the dragging sound grew louder, closer, that wet inhale filling the space, pulling at my clothes, my skin, my very breath. I screamed and barreled forward, slamming through what I thought was the front door. Sudden silence. I blinked. The air was still, cool, crisp. I was standing in the middle of the street outside. The chanting had stopped. The figures were gone. I looked around wildly, chest heaving. The house loomed behind me, dark and silent, windows empty. For a moment I thought I was free. Then I realized. Every house on the street was identical. Rows and rows of the same cheap house stretching in every direction, perfectly aligned. And in each window I saw them, faces. Hundreds of them, all staring out at me. Wide-eyed, silent, watching. My phone buzzed in my pocket. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. The screen lit up, though I swore it was dead. One new message, no number, just words across the screen. You can't leave. It's 3:33 everywhere, my legs buckled. I dropped to the pavement, the phone clattering beside me. I could feel it, the ground pulsing, the sky lowering, time itself bending. The world around me wasn't the street anymore. It was the house. An endless labyrinth of that cursed house looping in on itself. The basement door slammed behind me. I turned, slow, dread clawing at my spine. The door to the house was open again, yawning black, waiting. And from deep inside, that chorus of voices rose once more, louder, layered, as countless figures began dragging themselves up from the void. The message on the phone changed. 3 words now, pulsing like a heartbeat. Look outside. Now. Against every instinct, I turned my head. The sky had split open, black veins spiderwebbed across the clouds, and something enormous pressed against it from the other side. An eye, vast, lidless, staring straight down at me. The ground shook violently. I fell to my knees, hands over my ears as the sound of it speaking tore through me, though no words formed, only raw meaning, flooding my mind, boiling my thoughts. Images of screaming faces of thousands dragged into that endless house, of time breaking and looping forever. The last thing I saw before my vision went white was the basement door slamming shut on its own, trapping me outside, or maybe trapping me in. The world around me no longer felt like the street, the neighborhood, or even New Orleans. It was something else now, some twisted stage built only to trap me, confuse me, and break me piece by piece. I stood frozen in the middle of a road that stretched endlessly, lined with those same cheap houses repeating like copy-paste errors in reality. Every single one had its windows filled with faces. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared, every gaze drilling into me with silent judgment, like they were waiting for me to make the wrong move. My chest heaved as I forced myself to step backward, only to realize that the asphalt beneath my shoes was soft, too soft, like wet clay. Each step I took sank half an inch into the ground, and the sound of suction followed when I lifted my foot. My pulse spiked. The ground was alive. The silence shattered with a loud knock, 3 deliberate bangs echoing through the air. I spun, scanning the rows of houses, but they all remained still. Then it came again. Knock, 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 louder, closer. The sound wasn't from one house. It was from all of them. Every door on the street vibrated with the pounding in unison, like the heartbeat of a monster too large to comprehend. My instincts screamed at me to run, but where? The street stretched infinitely forward and back. The rows of identical houses curved at the horizon, forming a circle, a loop. There was no end, no exit. The only break in the impossible geometry was the house I'd come from, the original one. Its door stood open, black as a cave mouth, waiting like a trap disguised as salvation. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. Another message. No number, no name. Just 4 words, go back inside now. My breath hitched. My whole body rebelled against that command, but deep inside, I knew this labyrinth had no way out. The only direction was inward. I swallowed hard, forcing one foot in front of the other, each step pulling me closer to the house. The faces in the windows never moved, but I felt them watching, following me, their gaze heavier than gravity. I reached the porch, my hand hovering over the splintered frame of the door. The smell of damp, of rot, of something feral curled from within. My body screamed at me to run, but my mind whispered, "There's nowhere left." With a shaking breath, I stepped inside. The instant I crossed the threshold, the street outside vanished. The door slammed behind me. I was back in the hallway, but it wasn't the same. The walls pulsed faintly, as if veins ran beneath the peeling wallpaper. The floorboards swelled under my weight, creaking like bones breaking. I gripped the bat tighter, though it was cracked and useless, just a token to make me feel less exposed. "Why me?" I whispered, voice shaking. The house didn't answer, but it didn't need to. A deep groan rolled through the air, the sound of wood and stone shifting, of an old buried thing waking. Then I heard it, footsteps upstairs, slow, heavy, deliberate. My throat closed as I tilted my head, eyes locked on the staircase. I'd never gone up there. Until now, everything had been about the basement. But whatever waited above wanted me, needed me. The footsteps paused. Then in a low rasp, a voice called my name. My knees buckled. It wasn't a stranger's voice, it was my father's. The sound was perfect down to the weary gravel in his throat, the way he used to say my name when I was in trouble as a kid. But he was dead. Had been for years. "No," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "No, no, no." The voice came again, closer now, as though leaning over the railing of the stairs. "Come up here." My heart thrashed in my chest, torn between terror and grief. Part of me wanted to believe it, to let the familiarity pull me upward, to pretend for just a second that maybe somehow my father was waiting. But I knew. Deep down I knew. This was no reunion. This was bait. I forced myself backward, away from the stairs, but the moment my foot touched the floor behind me, a door slammed shut. Then another, then all of them, one by one, until the whole house echoed with the sound, locking me in. The voice laughed now, warped and layered, dozens of tones spilling out through my father's familiar cadence. The laugh grew louder, vibrating through the walls until I thought my skull would split from the pressure. I clamped my hands over my ears and screamed, but the sound burrowed inside me anyway, gnawing at my sanity. Then it stopped. Silence fell heavy. Too heavy. I opened my eyes, realizing the hallway had changed again. The wallpaper was gone, peeled away to expose walls of flesh, raw and glistening. The floor was no longer wood, it was bone, slick and uneven, ribs forming an endless corridor. I gagged, bile rising, but forced myself forward because standing still felt worse. I stumbled through the grotesque hall, every step echoing with the sound of dripping. From the ceiling, long strands of something wet dangled, brushing against my face. I swiped them away, only to feel them stick to my skin like cobwebs spun from blood. My breath came shallow, ragged, as I pushed into the next room. The kitchen. At least it had been. Now the counters were altars covered in bones, arranged in spirals and symbols carved into skulls. The sink overflowed with thick black liquid, spilling across the tiles in rivulets that writhed like worms. And there, in the center of the room, was the landlord. He stood perfectly still, smiling, eyes wide and hollow. "You shouldn't have looked outside," he said calmly, voice echoing like it came from the bottom of a well. My hands trembled as I raised the bat, though my arms felt weak, useless. "What is this?" I croaked. His smile widened, tearing the corners of his mouth until blood streamed down his chin. "It's home." His body convulsed, bones cracking as he bent backward, his chest splitting open like a door. From inside, something crawled out, long, thin, wet with glistening fluid. I stumbled back, screaming, as a second head pushed its way through his ribs, followed by a torso, by arms, until the landlord collapsed in a heap of empty skin, and the creature that had worn him stood tall. The same hollow-eyed thing from the basement, only now bigger, stronger, more solid. Its hollow gaze locked onto me, and the entire house groaned with hunger. The chanting started again, muffled at first, then swelling louder and louder, shaking the walls until chunks of ceiling rained down. It was everywhere, coming from the bones in the walls, from the worms in the sink, from the air itself. I bolted, crashing through the hallway. the creature's steps pounding after me. Every door I passed swung open, revealing nightmares worse than the last. Children with mouths stitched shut, rooms filled with water where figures floated lifeless, endless staircases descending into black. The house wasn't just alive, it was feeding on me, showing me everything it could conjure to strip me down to raw terror, and it was working. My lungs burned as I sprinted, searching desperately for escape until I saw it, the front door again. Wide open, a sliver of the outside world visible through it. Hope flared, weak but real. I hurled myself forward, feet pounding against bone, hand outstretched. The door slammed shut an inch from my fingertips. I screamed, slamming the bat against it until the wood splintered, but it didn't matter. It wasn't a door anymore. It was part of the wall, fused seamlessly, mocking me. Behind me, the creature inhaled. That same endless sucking void. My hair whipped toward it, my body dragged back by sheer force. I dug my nails into the bone floor, screaming, but I knew it was only a matter of time before it swallowed me whole. My fingernails tore against the bone floor, snapping and bleeding as I clawed for grip. The suction was relentless, dragging me inch by inch toward the hollow-eyed monster. My chest collapsed under the pressure, lungs burning as if the air itself had turned poisonous. I screamed, but my voice was ripped from my throat and pulled into that endless void. In sheer desperation, I swung the broken bat behind me. The wood cracked across its face with a wet thud. For the first time, it staggered. Just slightly, but enough. The suction faltered, and I hurled myself sideways into a doorway that hadn't been there before. I tumbled down a flight of stairs, crashing into darkness. My shoulder dislocated with a sickening pop, pain blinding me, but I didn't stop moving. I scrambled deeper, the air growing colder, wetter. The stairs twisted, spiraled, until I collapsed into a cavernous chamber. The basement, or something beyond it. The walls weren't walls anymore. They were stone, slick with condensation, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly like veins of fire. In the center of the chamber was a pit, wide and bottomless, its edges crumbling as if the earth itself couldn't contain it. From the pit rose a chorus of whispers, countless voices overlapping into a maddening hum. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. Hands shaking, I pulled it out. The screen glowed with a single message. Jump. My stomach turned to ice. No, I croaked. No, I can't. But before I could finish, the creature crashed into the chamber above, its limbs clawing down the staircase, joints cracking as it forced its enormous body through the too narrow passage. The whispers from the pit grew louder, urgent, rising into something almost like words. I realized with horror that they weren't begging me to jump. They were hungry, calling me down. The creature screeched, its hollow face tilting, mouth splitting wider and wider until it was nothing but an abyss of teeth. I staggered backward, my heels kicking stones into the pit. No bottom, just endless dark. My choices collapsed into two. Be devoured by the thing behind me or throw myself into the unknown below. My phone buzzed one last time. The message changed. Choose. Tears blurred my vision as I staggered on the edge, arms flailing for balance. Please, I begged, though I didn't know who I was begging. God, fate, whatever nightmare entity had written these rules. Please let me wake up. The creature lunged. I jumped. The air swallowed me whole, screaming wind tearing at my skin as I plummeted into the pit. Darkness closed in on every side, and the whispers became deafening, filling my skull, tearing apart every thought until there was nothing left but their endless hunger. For one brief second, I thought I felt hands, hundreds of them, reaching out to catch me, to pull me deeper, not to save me, but to claim me. Then the fall ended, not with an impact, but with silence. I was standing. My feet touched solid ground. My eyes snapped open, and I realized with sick horror where I was. The living room. The same couch. The same cheap coffee table. The same candle flickering weakly on the mantel. It was as if nothing had happened. The house was quiet. Normal. My chest heaved, my throat raw from screaming, but there was no monster, no chanting, no endless pit. For a moment, I almost believed I'd hallucinated everything. Almost. Then I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:33 a.m. The clock read 3:33 a.m. The glowing red digits burned into my eyes, mocking me like they had been waiting for me all along. My whole body trembled as I sat on the couch, staring at that clock, too afraid to even blink. Everything was quiet, unnaturally quiet. The chanting, the scratching, the pounding on the walls, it was all gone. The house looked exactly as it had the first night I arrived. Same cracked coffee table, Same sagging couch. Same faint smell of dust and mildew. It was almost normal. Almost. My chest heaved with shallow, broken breaths. My mind spun in circles, trying to understand. Had I imagined it all? Was this some twisted dream born out of exhaustion and paranoia? My shoulder throbbed painfully, and when I looked down, I saw the joint still dislocated, my arm hanging awkwardly at my side. The pain was real. The blood on my fingertips was real. Whatever had happened, it wasn't just in my head. I swallowed hard, my throat raw, and stood shakily to my feet. The air felt different now, still heavy but not suffocating, like the house had loosened its grip for the first time. I stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the street was empty. No chanting figures. No endless rows of identical houses. Just the cracked asphalt, the flickering streetlight, the night fog curling through the air. For the first time in what felt like hours, maybe days, I thought I could breathe. A fragile, tentative relief washed over me, so sharp it almost made me cry. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and whispered, "It's over." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Not completely. Not with the memory of that pit, of those hollow eyes still burning behind my eyelids. My stomach churned with unease. Something about the silence felt wrong, staged like a predator lying in wait. I pulled myself away from the window and limped to the kitchen. My throat screamed for water, but when I turned the faucet, the pipes groaned before spitting out a thin trickle of black sludge. I gagged, shoving the handle off, stumbling back. My body shook with exhaustion. My brain screamed at me to run, but where could I go? If I left, would the street even be real? Would I step outside only to find myself right back here at 333, trapped in another loop? I forced myself into the bathroom, gripping the sink with my good arm, staring into the cracked mirror. My reflection stared back, pale, blood smeared across my face. My eyes were hollow, rimmed red, and for a moment I didn't recognize myself. Then behind me, movement. I spun, heart slamming into my ribs. Nothing, just the empty hallway stretching into the dark. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection didn't move. My stomach dropped. It just stared, eyes wide, a split second too still, too deliberate. Then slowly, its lips curled upward into a smile. I screamed and smashed the mirror with my elbow, shards raining into the sink, blood searing across my arm. The reflection was gone. Just broken glass. I stumbled backward, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. This wasn't over. It was pretending, letting me breathe, lulling me into a false sense of safety before the next horror began. I crawled into the bedroom, collapsed onto the mattress, clutching the bat against my chest. The silence pressed against me like a weight, thicker and heavier the longer it lasted. My eyelids drooped, exhaustion dragging me under despite every warning in my head. Just for a second, I thought, just 1 second of rest. Darkness swallowed me. When I opened my eyes again, the room was exactly the same. The same shadows, the same silence. For one fragile heartbeat, I thought I'd actually slept, that maybe the nightmare had finally broken. Then I looked at the clock on the nightstand. 3:33 a.m. Still. Always. I couldn't breathe. My lungs refused to expand. The numbers glowed brighter, searing into me, as if they were carved into the fabric of reality itself. I scrambled from the bed, every nerve in my body screaming, every instinct begging me to move, but I didn't know where to go. The house seemed still, quiet, almost forgiving, but I knew better. This was no reprieve. This was the breath before the plunge, the pause before the blade fell. I sank to my knees in the center of the bedroom, clutching my head, rocking back and forth. "Please," I begged. "Please let it end." The house answered with silence. A silence so thick it felt alive. The kind of silence that waits, that watches, that promises. My phone buzzed against my thigh. My hand shook as I pulled it free, terrified of what I'd see. The screen lit up with one last message. 4 words. Words that froze my blood solid. It hasn't started yet. The words on my phone screen burned into me like a brand. It hasn't started yet. My hand shook so violently that I dropped the device, watching it clatter across the warped floorboards. The message didn't vanish. The glow from the screen spread faintly, spilling red light across the room until it looked like the walls themselves were bleeding. I forced myself to breathe, though every inhale came shallow, ragged. My body was wrecked, my shoulder throbbed, my arm numb, my throat raw from screaming. Yet the words rooted me in a cold, ugly truth. Everything up until now had only been a prelude. Whatever nightmare I'd endured wasn't the climax. It was the warm-up. I staggered to my feet, gripping the cracked bat with my good hand. The silence of the house pressed in deeper than ever, but beneath it I heard something new. A rhythm, faint at first, then louder. A slow, steady pounding like a massive heartbeat hidden inside the walls. Boom, boom, boom. My teeth rattled with each pulse. The air itself trembled. I stumbled into the hallway, the shadows stretching unnaturally long, the wallpaper peeling in strips that revealed raw stone underneath. The heartbeat grew louder as I moved, guiding me, dragging me until I found myself back in the living room. The candle still flickered weakly on the mantel, but its flame bent toward the center of the room as though pulled by invisible gravity. There, where the rug had been, the floorboards had split open. A jagged crack gaped wide, glowing faintly red from below, pulsing in time with the heartbeat. I froze, bat trembling in my grip. The house wasn't just a prison. It was alive, and its heart was opening. My phone buzzed again. Against every instinct, I picked it up. One word glared back at me: enter. My stomach twisted. I wanted to run, to hurl myself through the nearest window and never look back. But I remembered the street outside, the rows of identical houses, the endless loop. There was no escape that way. The only path was down. My body shook as I crouched, peering into the glowing crack. The heat rising from it seared my skin, carrying the smell of sulfur, rot, and something faintly sweet like spoiled fruit. I gagged, bile burning my throat. Then, with no other choice, I slipped my legs into the opening and lowered myself in. The crack widened unnaturally as I slid, bone and wood bending like flesh to let me pass. My body scraped against walls that were warm, pulsing, alive. I screamed but kept sliding, tumbling into darkness until I fell hard onto a surface that wasn't stone, wasn't wood. Something softer, springier, like muscle. The chamber around me glowed faint red, vast and cavernous, lined with ribs thicker than tree trunks. Veins pulsed along the walls, pumping with that terrible heartbeat. And in the center of the chamber, rising like a tower, was a mass of flesh and bone, twisted into a shape that almost resembled a throne. Sitting atop it was the landlord, or what was left of him. His skin hung loose, his mouth stretched into a permanent grin. His hollow eyes locked onto me as though he'd been waiting. "You came," he said, his voice layered wrong. "They always come." My bat slipped from my hand, clattering to the fleshy ground. My voice cracked as I forced words out. What is this place?" His grin widened, splitting his cheeks until blood dripped down his jaw. "Home," he rasped, echoing the same word from before. Only now it wasn't just his voice, it was thousands, overlapping in unison, spilling from the walls, the floor, the air. "This is the heart. This is where you belong." I stumbled back, clutching my head as the voices poured in, threatening to drown me. Images flashed behind my eyes. Faces screaming, endless halls of bone, people dragged into the same chamber only to be consumed, melted into the walls, their souls bound to the heartbeat forever. My stomach turned to ice. That was the fate waiting for me. Unless I did something. My eyes darted to the cracks along the walls, to the pulsing veins, to the grotesque throne. Somewhere in this living nightmare there had to be a weakness, something keeping the cycle alive, something I could break. The landlord rose from the throne, his limbs bending and snapping as he grew taller, stretching until he towered above me. His grin never wavered. "You can't fight it," he whispered. "It was never your choice." His arm extended, longer than it should have been, his fingers reaching, curling toward me. My panic snapped into something else, defiance. Maybe I couldn't win, but I refused to just be swallowed quietly. My eyes locked onto the pulsing veins that fed into the throne, pumping that sick red glow. The heart. If this was truly alive, it had to have one. A center, a core. I grabbed the bat again, knuckles white, and sprinted forward. The landlord's hand snapped down, slamming the ground inches from me, the impact sending me flying. But I rolled and kept going. I swung with every ounce of strength left in me, the bat cracking against one of the veins. The chamber shook. The heartbeat faltered. The landlord shrieked, a sound that shattered the air, splitting into countless voices that screamed in unison. Black fluid gushed from the torn vein, splattering across my arms, sizzling like acid. I screamed in pain but swung again and again, tearing the vein apart. The chamber convulsed, the walls rippling as if the entire house was having a seizure. The throne split, flesh tearing, bone cracking. The landlord collapsed to his knees, his grin finally faltering. "You can't stop it," he croaked, voice breaking into static. "You'll only make it worse." The floor split open beneath me, the pit yawning wide, sucking everything toward it. The landlord, the throne, the veins. I scrambled, clinging to a jagged bone as the pull threatened to drag me down. The landlord's body stretched, skin peeling as he was pulled into the pit, his grin returning even as he dissolved. "We'll see you again," his voice echoed, fading into the abyss. The chamber buckled. The walls cracked. The heartbeat sputtered, and then silence. For a moment I thought I'd done it, that I'd broken the cycle, that maybe, just maybe, I was free. Then the pit erupted. A column of black light shot upward, swallowing me whole. The world twisted, my body ripped apart and stitched back together in a single instant. I screamed, but there was no sound. No air, no reality, just endless dark. And then, I was standing in the living room again. The couch, the candle, the clock on the wall, 3:33 a.m. The living room stood around me exactly as before. The couch, the crooked picture frames, the faint smell of mildew clinging to the air. My chest heaved as I spun in place, clutching the bat with blistered hands, expecting the walls to split open again, for the landlord to crawl out grinning, but nothing moved. The candle flame wavered slightly, mocking me. My phone vibrated once more. I almost didn't want to look, but some compulsion forced my eyes downward. The screen glowed with 3 words, "It begins now." My heart nearly stopped. My throat burned as I croaked out, No, I ended it. I destroyed the veins. I broke your heart." But even as I said the words, I knew how hollow they were. Around me, the room pulsed faintly with that same rhythm, slower this time, but steady. Boom, boom, boom. The house wasn't dead. It was patient, waiting. I stumbled toward the front door, yanking it open. The cold night spilled in, the street beyond stretching endless, lined with rows of identical houses just as before. Every porch light burned the same sickly yellow. My stomach dropped. The loop hadn't broken. If anything, it had tightened. I stepped outside, forcing myself onto the cracked sidewalk. But the moment my foot touched the pavement, all the porch lights flickered. In unison, my breath caught. One by one, the doors of the neighboring houses creaked open. Shadows slipped out, dozens, maybe hundreds. They moved unnaturally, their limbs bending at wrong angles, faces smudged as if unfinished. Yet I recognized them. I had seen them in the visions. Past tenants, swallowed whole, now spat back out as echoes of themselves. Their mouths opened as one, releasing a single wordless scream that split the air like glass shattering. I stumbled back into the house, slamming the door shut. My phone buzzed again. "Don't run, watch." My knees buckled. "Watch what?" The answer came immediately. The clock on the wall ticked once, then stopped. Its hands froze at 3:33 a.m. A silence heavier than death filled the room. I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat. Then the walls began to bleed. Thin lines of dark fluid trickled from the ceiling corners, dripping down the wallpaper, pooling on the floor. The smell hit me like a brick, copper and rot, thick enough to choke. I gagged, covering my mouth, backing away. The fluid spread quickly, climbing furniture legs, soaking into the couch cushions. Within moments, the floor squelched beneath my shoes. The candle sputtered and died. The only light left came from outside the window. I forced myself to look. My stomach lurched. Every house across the street now burned with fire. Flames roared silently inside their windows, but the structures never collapsed. They stood firm, eternal, as shadow figures writhed inside them. And every single window across the block glowed with a pair of eyes staring directly at me. My scream caught in my throat. The glass of my own window cracked, then shattered. Cold air whipped through as shadows poured inside, twisting like smoke, clawing the walls, circling me. I swung the bat wildly, screaming, but every strike passed through them uselessly. They pressed closer, whispering in overlapping voices, each syllable drilling into my skull. "You stayed. You belong. You stayed. You belong." My phone buzzed in my pocket again. I yanked it out with trembling fingers. This time the words weren't typed. They were etched across the screen like scars. "Give in." My chest heaved. Tears blurred my vision. My mind teetered on the edge of breaking. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe the house didn't want tenants. Maybe it wanted sacrifices. And maybe I'd been marked the moment I stepped across the threshold. "No," I whispered hoarsely. "No, I won't." My eyes darted to the broken window, to the fire beyond, to the endless block of houses stretching forever. If there was no way forward, maybe the only way was through. I screamed, forcing myself to leap through the shattered frame. Glass tore at my arms as I crashed onto the cold pavement outside. Immediately, the world tilted. The sidewalk stretched into infinity, twisting upward into the sky. The burning houses loomed impossibly tall, their flames bending backward, their shadows reaching down like hands. I scrambled to my feet running down the street, though every step felt like sinking into quicksand. Shadows chased me, dozens of them, their whispers clawing into my ears, promising pain, promising eternity. My lungs burned. My legs faltered. Still I ran. I don't know how long. Time had no meaning. The street bent and bent, looping back on itself until at last I found myself in front of the same house again. My house. Its windows glowed faintly red, heartbeat pulsing. My chest collapsed. I had never escaped. I had only been pulled back. The shadows pressed closer, forming a circle around me. My phone buzzed one final time. My hands shook as I raised it. Only 2 words this time. Choose now. I stared, mind-breaking. Choose what? There was no option, no door, no path. Just the house and the shadows and the endless fire. But then I realized the bat was still clutched in my grip. My body was ruined, broken, but I had one choice left. Destroy myself before the house could claim me. End it on my terms. My throat closed as I raised the bat. My arms trembled. Tears poured down my face. The shadows screamed in fury, their whispers rising into a violent roar. My hand tightened, ready to strike my own skull. Then the door of the house creaked open. I froze. In the doorway stood the landlord, whole, perfect, his grin stretched wider than ever. You've already chosen, he said softly. My phone slipped from my hand. The shadows fell silent. The fire froze. Everything stilled. He beckoned with one hand. Come home. My legs moved before I could stop them. I screamed, fought, dug my heels into the ground, but invisible strings dragged me forward. My body lurched up the steps, across the threshold. The moment I crossed inside, the door slammed shut behind me. Darkness swallowed everything, and the last thing I heard was the clock ticking once more. 3:34 a.m.